Welcome back to the channel, this time talking about injury prevention. So I looked through all the articles that I could find online, and basically you can break it down into three categories. One being rules and regulations, two being equipment, and three being training, which will be the main bulk of what I'll be talking about in this video today. This doesn't fit perfectly into those three categories, but just as a bit of an anecdote, I remember in uni there was a professor that was talking about sport injuries, and he mentioned that one of the big factors as to why some people don't get injured is purely just by way of their situational and spatial awareness. So athletes like this just avoid getting hurt because they're aware of what's happening around them, and they avoid these situations that are potentially a danger to them. And I think he was talking about it in the context of ice hockey. So players who are able to avoid getting hit because they know when the hit is coming, or at least they are able to brace themselves so they don't take the full brunt of the hit. And you can translate this over into field hockey to an extent as well. For example, thinking about avoiding tackling on the wrong side if we can, so we avoid that backswing, or being aware of where people are around you so that you don't collide with other athletes. Maybe if you know somebody who is less skilled and you can anticipate if they're just going to wildly swing their stick around, but then of course there are situations that are just out of your control, stuff like this, where you really can't do anything about it. Shout out Greg from Men's One. But yeah, again, going to those three categories, you have rules and regulations. The FIH sorts that's not really in our control, but thinking of things like not being able to raise the ball into somebody above the knee, or the 5-meter rule when an aerial is coming down. If we're talking equipment, that's quite self-explanatory. Wear your mouth guard, use your glove, wear your shin guards. Goalkeeper has their equipment, and then defensive PC masks and things like that as well. So in the studies that I looked at, looking at where injuries are coming from, this older one from 2000 showed 51% coming from the lower limb, and then the second most would be the head and face. And then this next one looked at a bunch of FIH events, so international level players. With that one, for the women, it was primarily head and face, and then second lower limb. For the men, it was head and face and lower limb equally affected. And then lastly, one looking at recreational players. So with this one, with the youth players, it was a lot of knee injuries during games. With the adults, it was hamstring strains in preseason, and then head and face injuries as well. A lot of times the head and face type injuries, those are impact from the ball or the stick. Again, these impact type of ones are situations that just sort of happen, they're out of our control. But if we put those impact injuries aside, then we get left with a lot of lower body sprains and strains. And even just anecdotally, if I look at my own life in people that I've met playing this game, it is typically, the pulling up of hamstrings, ACL, MCL tears, and then the odd groin strain. In the research that I looked at, one of the big factors of injury prevention is the concept of NMT, neuromuscular training. And without getting too sciencey, jargony with it, what that basically breaks down to is activities that challenge the coordination of your brain and your body segments. And how you do that is by having functional exercises that translate to sport or your lifestyle. So that means using exercises that have a stability and balance component, so your body segments are forced to be aligned and controlled through the movement. Exercises with agility components, so your brain has to coordinate quick, fast movements, and core strengthening exercises which lay a foundation for those previous two factors. The purpose of this video is to condense the science down into something digestible for the average person. So I won't go super detailed into the research, but just a few of the main conclusions I found from what I read through. There's this one over here that just broadly talked about the importance of NMT in terms of your body or your brain processing information from the receptors in your joints about joint position, from the balance structures in your inner ear, and from visual cues, combining all those three to help you better control movement and have better functional joint stability. Then there's this next one that found NMT reduced inward and outward knee deviation. With outward deviation, it's more a concern of general long-term wear and tear, if for example that you're bow-legged, and maybe if you have a specific direct impact to the knee that pushes it outward. But typically, as far as sports injuries, the inward caving in of the knees is the bigger concern. Actually, in fact, hopefully I'm in frame, but yeah, it's that caving in of the knee that's really harsh on the ligaments, and then it's the classic plant cave in and twist or rotate. That's your classic ACL tear injury mechanism. In fact, if it's bad enough, you can blow your MCL with that as well. There's this one that looked at netball athletes and had them perform a landing task. When we do jumping or plyometric type exercises, we tend to focus on the vertical distance, but actually the landing itself is also very important. With this one, they found the athletes that did a 6-week NMT program, essentially they just were able to control their landing much better. They were able to land much more softly by bending their knees more, and they also caved their knees inwards much less on the landing. Now, heading into the gym, I'll just leave you with a few exercises you can put into your weekly routine. They check off all the boxes as far as the aspects of NMT and the fact that we have a large number of lower body strains in hockey. First, to start, we have a step down. Since you're doing it on one leg, that's your balance and stability aspect right there. You have to control yourself through the whole movement, and also you're working on knee stability because, again, you want to have that control. You don't want to cave your knees in at any point through the movement. Then here, a lateral squat. This one is great for strengthening your adductors, and then again, you have that balance and stability aspect, and you also want to stabilize your knees. You don't want to cave them in at any point during the movement. And again, we said that the hamstrings was one area of focus, so some hamstring curls. I do them single leg so that you don't have the stronger side compensating for the weaker. And then I have this Copenhagen plank. These feel terrible, to be honest, but they are great for strengthening your adductors, and then that checks off that core strengthening element of NMT. I don't have footage here, but as far as agility ladders, you can incorporate into your warm-up, or I have a previous video where I did a box drill. You can check that out here. Again, to quickly summarize, the 3 categories would be rules and regulations, equipment, and then thirdly would be training. With training, it's really important to use NMT, which basically means using exercises and movements that incorporate balance and stability, agility, and core strengthening. If we're talking hockey players, the main areas of focus would be hamstring, groin, and the knees. So there you go, you've learned something about injury prevention. Hopefully this helps the longevity of your hockey career or sport career, whether that means going to an Olympics or just a few extra seasons of Sunday League with your friends. If you made it this far, thank you so much. As always, leave a comment for some feedback. Like if you liked it, share if you think somebody else might too, and subscribe so you're in the loop for whatever it is I come up with next. See ya.